The MTG podcast is a virtual space for women and men in the tech and creative industries.
Tune in as we put it all on the table, sharing authentic life truths as we sustain and empower each other in search of our tribe.
We're more than a designer. We're more than our name badge. We're more than the work we produce.
Welcome to the More Than Graphics podcast.
We're that tribe.
I love that intro. Hello, everyone. Cicely, what's good? Welcome to the More Than Graphics podcast, everybody. I'm Danielle.
I'm Cicely. How are you guys today?
It's one of those moments where you're just kind of like, I want to appreciate everything that's happening at one time, but your brain can only soak up so much. So
Yes.
It's almost kind of like a brain fart, if you will, that ends up happening. Like, oh, this is gonna be so good, and then oh wait, slow down, you're gonna miss some details. So this is kind of that moment for me today. As you may or may not know, today's topic is reboot. And oh man, every time I think of that word, I actually think of the old early 90s, late 90s show. It happened right after Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, the show called Reboot. It was like a 3D old school 90s show. Every time I think of it, I'm like, oh, Reboot.
Oh, that's hilarious.
It's like the little music and all the things. I'm like, oh yeah. If you know where I'm at, yeah. I just told my entire age in like 0.5 seconds. So it's one of those situations where when I think about reboot, obviously I think about beginning again, start almost a restart. But I feel like the difference in some areas maybe between restart and reboot is like this, kind of the way we go about it. I feel like restart is like, clean slating some areas. Rebooting is that moment where it kind of stopped for a second and then whoop, like go back again. Kind of like what we talked about a little bit with rest, right? Rest isn't necessarily the drop and do nothing. It's just that ebb and flow, that downward feel of slowing down and learning to pick back up again. So I just feel like reboot is a lot in that kind of format. But just in general, like let's just catch up for a second before we deep dive into that. What's good in your world, Cicely?
Absolutely. So with rebooting, it's like this was the perfect timing for this because for me, it means school is out for the summer. It means that my brain can relax for 90-ish days. And like that to me is a reboot. Like I get to unplug, reset. So for me, the rebooting is dumping my brain from all the things I've learned for the past, 4 months. And then just being a normal, non-scholastic person and just living my best life for the summer.
Oh, you said that to a T. I mean, I'm covered 4 kids in some areas, and so 5 if you include my husband. And it's really funny because as we talk about like, rebooting in that same general, I'm in the same way. I'm like, where my mind is being rebooted right now because I'm going from a whole bunch of scholastic, hurry up and get your grades together so that I don't have an aneurysm at some point about my kids' education to, okay, now I can sit in the kiddie pool and have, L8s by myself or with my toddler at least. So it's just kind of like, that change of, yes, you know what I mean? With that, just that kind of mindset of free time. What does that look like? And what does that really do for us in this time frame of end of year of school to summer bling and fling and fun and all that kind of stuff? So I definitely can relate to that. Definitely want that mindset more for myself. Sit back with a little umbrella in the cup. Maybe we should totally think about doing this in the future because we talked about doing it last time when we did this collab with the Shy Guys last year, doing like this whole 90s tribute, like kickback with the power of the water soakers, the Nerf little power soakers,
super soakers. Yep.
There we go, super soakers, and hanging in the back with the drinks and the umbrellas and hanging out in the kiddie pool. Like I clearly remember this vision that we didn't get to completely finish, but maybe we can try again. Maybe the fellows will let us hang out with them for a little while. That's hilarious. But yeah, I'm really excited to try. Oh, girl, you already know. Like you already know. And I will definitely be this is for you, Kevin. I got a super soaker with your name on it. Okay, that's for you. He's gonna listen to this later and he'll be like, Lord. But anywho, I just kind of wanted to kind of break that ice and just kind of hope that anyone in listening range can find a sense of rebooting on their own level, whatever that looks like. If that's coming from work to back to home life or home life back to work, or just traveling in general, whatever that space is, rebooting. I hope that this is going to continue to be a interesting conversation for you. But we have an amazing special guest to talk about Reboot today. I'm a little fangirling because this is like a really cool person that I seriously want to acclimate into being more of as I live out my long illustrious years. So this is something that I'm really excited to bring on, and I'll have Cicely introduce her today.
Absolutely. So Sheri, before I get into your last name, I want to make sure I'm pronouncing it right. Allain.
Yes, rhymes with pain.
Perfect. Okay. So
I may or may not have been called that.
I would never believe that that's ever a possibility. All right. So today's guest is Sheri Allain. As a geeky creative, Sheri is a lifelong marketer who dreams in logos and loves to test drive new tech tools. As an award-winning marketer for Fortune 500 brands such as Coca-Cola, Nissan, Unilever, Sheri applied her brand building skills to found Codezilla, a six-figure tech ed business that teaches at 40 plus schools in Toronto. Her passion is turning boring brands into sales magnets as a business consultant at ZipLaunch. Welcome to Sheri.
Thank you, Cicely and Danielle. And so two things. One is I realized after I submitted my bio, I never mentioned I'm a mom and I have kids. Because the second thing is, your kids are out of school. I'm in Canada. We still have 2.5 more months.
Oh my gosh.
We need to move. What postal code are you in? We need to relocate.
Yeah, they're definitely thinking about maybe making it a 4-day weekday even. I think they're seriously considering that now in our school district. So is that something you already have going on up there?
We don't, but because exactly as was said, I'm a big believer in education. I come from a family of teachers on my mom's side. So I've looked into this, that summer slump is real.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever you can do to shorten that gap, especially after COVID, where we had Zoom school for how many months/years?
Right. A whole year over here.
Ouch.
Mm-hmm. A whole year.
That's tough. Yes. I remember someone saying that your child's report card was like not cut out for Zoom school. I forget whose child that was, but I was laughing out loud. People were looking at me because it was such a funny part in the previous podcast you did. So I feel for your pain.
Yeah, it was no joke. Like that was a struggle. But I feel like in other areas, and especially I guess for us, because we're also moms of neurodivergent children. So it was something that actually helped thrive for them in some areas. I'm speaking for myself, not to put words in Cicely's mouth, but I feel like it was something that helped my son specifically kind of staying at home, staying put without having to socially incline in certain areas. Whereas my other children, they were just like, get me out of here, Mom, no way. This is not going to fly. I cannot breathe. Please put me outside. At this point, they were just like, I don't care if I get COVID. I just want to breathe outside.
That's dramatic, but it's appropriate.
I'm like, oh my gosh, like seriously, this can't be that bad, but it really was for them emotionally. This was a little bit of a crippling year for them to go online. But this year they've been in person all year long. It is back to smooth things. Kids are doing their thing. They're socializing. They're able to, be in their happy places and take on, their tests and their finals and their quizzes and all the things. So there's some normality that's returning in some areas, but it will never truly be the same. So it's just really cool to kind of see that also happening at the same time when we talk about kids. So it's great that you're a mom. You can totally relate to all the things.
I can. So I commiserate and I appreciate what you've had to go through because it's real.
It really is. It really is. Totally. Well, I had a really cool kickoff question because I know we talk about rebooting and that means so many different things to so many different people. So I kind of want to get your perspective. How do you define the action of rebooting?
Yeah. So, you hinted at it already, Danielle, and I actually made sure I Googled it just to make sure that I wasn't making up a definition or what I think differs from what the internet says. But it's about restarting or reviving. And I think what's really important, because we do always I think like your analogy, right? Of the Power Rangers, you have this reboot computer example. I think we think there's a reboot button and you just hit that button and kabam, your screen comes back on and the cursor starts flashing. But there's no button for rebooting. It's, according to the definition, it's a process or sequence. And I thought that was really critical because you're not just restarting, you're restarting through a process or sequence. And that is probably the reality check that we don't always want to hear. There's no easy button or reboot button.
Oh my gosh, I love that. All my feels. I might just tear up. So this is like one of those moments where I'm like, it's the sequence, it's the ... it's the rearranging of the binary. Like it's all of those type of things that we're wired a certain way. And so when we talk about rebooting in that way, it's kind of like, okay, now I got to create a little bit of a new language so I can create a new program that does a different action.
Yeah.
And so, this is my love language. Like I could do this all day, but I love the fact that you have kind of experienced this on, I'm sure on a multitude of different levels and working with Fortune 500 companies and being able to start up this tech startup from the ground up. So, I mean, I think in a lot of ways, you are a great example of having to reboot in some areas.
So, what's funny, Danielle, I went back and I thought, let me actually count based on that definition of restarting. And there's a sequence of events. Let me go back because it's important to start off by saying I am midlife. So, I'm more than half midlife probably, although longevity runs in my family. But based on that, how many times have I personally rebooted my life, either on my own accord or been forced to reboot? And I think I'm up to like my 15th or 16th reboot. And that is based on criteria. Yeah, well, think about it, right? Years ago, I read this interesting line, and it said the three most stressful things in life are death, divorce, and moving or relocation. Now, that sounds, in light of where, 2020, that list of three sounds pretty tame in comparison. Like, really? Pandemic, race riots based on like years of discrimination. Like there's this, losing your job. Like there's so much to be adding to that list. But I can look at my personal family from moving to the Caribbean, where my dad's from at age 7, back to the prairies where my mom's from 2 years later, then to London, England for school, back to Toronto. I moved in and out of my own city. I've been laid off twice from corporate Canada. I've started 3 companies. I got married, had kids. Like those were all reboots, right? Whether you plan it or not, layoff, relocation. I probably have all those reboots. Marriage in some ways seems the easiest until you hit like, I don't know, year 7. Or as I call my husband, my future ex-husband. So we'll see if we survive like year 2.5 of COVID, because I'm up for anything at this point, right? I'm not going to bet anything on how things work out. But yeah, it's just, you always have to keep on, like any program, right? There's a glitch in the matrix. You got to go back and figure out the code, figure out where the bug is, and you got to tweak it till you're back up and running.
Oh, and she mentioned Matrix, y'all. Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean the original. I don't mean the reboot of the Matrix. I mean the original.
Oh no, I'm with you. We need to acknowledge the black cat in the room. Like I think that is extremely important as we talk about going into this Matrix and reliving some things.
Yeah, it's like Star Wars 1 or Star Wars 507. Like it's a very different. It's a very different grading scale I have. But anyway.
I love that definition. I will totally cherish that. And I think that is so measurable in a way that other people can relate to rebooting in any sense of the word, in regards to life and in regards to our professional careers. So for women in tech and women creatives, like there's going to be a season, as we kind of talked a little bit off mic, was this ebb and flow, as we mentioned before.
Yeah.
So, understanding that ebb and flow and that different types of ebbs and different types of flows are going to be continuing. And that season of rebooting is a part of that process. So I just not to deter people from that process, but to embrace that process. Because at the end, it's going to give us a cleaner source code. And that's really the bottom line.
Ooh, that's good. I would never have thought it that way. Because here's the thing, people always say, like, embrace the process, embrace the change. I don't. I actually don't like the messy middle. I just want the results. Like, there's a reason my company's called ZipLaunch, and I have a 30-day ZipLaunch. And people have come back and said, it's too fast. And I'm like, really? You want to drag this out longer than we need to? It's like, it's funny. I'm very impatient, I know. And I'm at the point when you're midlife, I don't have the luxury of patience. So if I was ever uptight, it's just been amplified further. But you're totally right. And I have, it'll be a 90-day ZipLaunch because what did someone tell me? Actually, a man told me this, and I never understood it until, like, I swear, a decade later. It takes 9 months to have a baby. You cannot hire 9 women and have a baby in 1 month. And honestly, I didn't know what he was talking about. And now I get it, right? Like, it is what it is, what it is. You got to go through that whole 9-month process to get the magic at the end.
Wow. I love that. That was so deep and profound. Y'all take notes. I am.
I was gonna say we are.
For sure. Cicely, I know that totally resonates with you because, I mean, obviously in nursing, we talk about, birthing and 9 months and all the things. I'm just like, this is a process. And for myself, who just had a baby like less than 2 years ago, this is like no joke. Like, that process is for real. There's times where I did want to fast forward. I did want to get to the end. Like, can we just skip to the end, please? There was moments I really did not want to I didn't want to be in that moment. I just wanted to fast forward and get to the end. But in thinking about it now, it's kind of, okay, there was a reason for that. I know I needed to be in that moment because other things needed to be spurning, churning, growing as I'm in this place of discomfort. So there was reasons for that. But at the end of it all, I definitely wanted to just fast forward and get to it. But I know you can relate, Cicely, to just kind of understanding that process.
Absolutely. And I'm so glad that you and Sheri brought it up. But like, everyone is always, like, patience, you have to be patient. Like, just miss me with that. I 100%, I want to, like, zoom through life like Sheri. I'm trying to, like, no, not really. But I understand, like, there's times you have to, like, just like Danielle said, there were times you want to just click on through, fast forward. And there are moments you need to relish, right? Like, moments you need to cherish. But I am so impatient, and, like, my whole life, I've just been hearing people, well, you have to be patient. You have to be patient. In some things, I believe that is true. But like Sheri with her 30-day ZipLaunch, like, I'm all about it. If I can get something done in 30 days that other people take 9 months to do, sign me up. I am that person. Please, let's expedite the process. And it's terrible because that even spills over into, like, my regular everyday life too. Because, like, sometimes my husband will be telling a story and I'll be like, come on with the story. And even my son Liam, like, sometimes he's a little bit like, you have to, like, pull stories out of him, and I'm like, so have we reached, like, the climax yet? Like, what's going on? So I think it's very important to realize that, your speed may not be my speed and vice versa. And that, like, literally in our own journeys, in the journeys of our lives, career, relationships, that we have to kind of do things at a pace that works for us. And I, clearly understand zip speed and turbo speed doesn't always work in every situation. But we have to, understand that maybe Danielle needs to fast forward through certain parts of little baby Theo's childhood. And that, maybe Sheri needs to fast forward through some of the parts of this business launch. I totally get it. And in that same vein, just what are some tips that you have in terms of when it's time for yourself to reboot? Like, what are some of the kind of signs and symptoms? See, that's the nurse coming out. What are the signs and symptoms of your rebooting? So just what's something that for yourself, like, oh girl, it's time to reboot, it's time to regather, it's time to reset and try a different sequence.
Yeah. So before I get there, I've got to say, you both need to do stand-up mic, because I know a podcast is amplifying your voice, but I honestly think you need to do stand-up comedy, because, like, I honestly listen to your podcast while going for long walks and laughing like a maniacal woman to myself, where, people think you're crazy, right? So up in Canada, we're a little bit more prim and proper. So when you laugh at yourself and you're not talking on a phone, people really think there's something wrong with you. Anyway, when do you know it's time to reboot? I think it partly depends on what's happened to you, right? So, look, the three easy ones that I mentioned earlier on, like when I say easy, the three, non-pandemic systemic racism ones are like death is really serious, right? Um, Divorce and moving. Moving could be relocation, moving job. Like for me, I have a low meter for like low tolerance for BS. Very impatient, goes back to like the flip side of being fast is being impatient. So I decided in my life when I'm bored, because my family moved around a bit, I was semi-nomadic. I actually like moving. Moving is a really great chance to reinvent yourself. You don't get that very often in life. So when I decide like I just want to change the scenery, I do it because I'm also very risk averse. Like I'm not a crazy like, those guys in San Francisco, like Silicon Valley, just putting it all out there. I'm still really cautious, so I will move to go to university or what you call college in the US, right? So I make strategic decisions. I will move careers when I think, okay, I left corporate Canada working on like the good, safe corporate job because the internet, web 1.0, oh my God, we're in 3.0. I go back to web 1.0. That's how midlife I am or how fast technology's evolved. But when I was getting bored with corporate Canada and I saw the internet was more about making business, like growing business, that or porn. It was pornography or it was growing businesses, right? And when I start to see it more and more taking off, that's when I'm like, this is really interesting and intriguing. How do I ride it? And that's why now I'm literally, I listened to a great podcast by a really wonderful woman who's a Black woman, African American, and she's been doing something in her niche that's totally like not done with IP law. And she's like all about Web 3.0 and Bitcoin and NFTs. And I was like, this is so cool. Like I need to not sit on the sidelines. I need to get into it. So, partly it's boredom. It's partly just it's time. Like if you don't reinvent yourself, someone else is going to. And ebb and flow, you don't want to be flowing with the tide. Like at some point you need to go against the current and you need to invent your life, not wait for someone else to dictate it to you.
Well spoken and well said. And I love like this is kind of where we diverge in personalities. So you were talking about you're very risk averse. I'm like, let's take a risk. I'm all about it. I'm about the thrill. But everything else is so spot on. Like I realized I'm in my early 30s now, and I realized probably about 10 years ago, in my early 20s, that like if something doesn't excite me anymore, that I'm really not going to grow from doing it. Like there's just kind of nothing, like the thrill is gone, right? Like there's nothing left for me to do. There's no path left for me to go. So I'm very much, when I leave a job, now I'm more strategic because, I have a kid, I have a family, and like, I'm a whole adult out here, sure. But now I am more strategic because I understand like, oh yeah, there's bills to be paid. Like, there's a kid to take care of, all these things. Like my husband probably wouldn't be very happy if he had to be the only person with a job for like 3 months. So, there's other things, but I'm so glad that you said that kind of that, like in rebooting, there's also growth as well. Like you're pushing yourself, you're stretching yourself. And even though you say you're like risk averse, I don't think so. Because I still think that making those changes is a risky business. And that even though you're more cautious about the changes. So again, you may not be like as crazy and gung-ho about it as I am, but you're still making those changes. Even if you've thought about it before, you're still making those changes and you're still pushing yourself to do it. Because it's hard to jump out of, and we all know this, it's very hard to jump out of what is comfortable. Like your little bubble, your comfort net, all that's very nice and safe and secure, but it's very hard to jump and move out of that bubble, especially with a family, especially when you're just kind of worried about, well, I don't know what's next, or, what will be there to catch me. So I think it's really awesome that you brought that up. And I think that's so important, whether working in corporate, whether having your own business, or sometimes like you're kind of like me, kind of a foot in each dimension. So I think that's awesome. And thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm over here like writing down all the notes. I'm just like, yes. When you are talking about specifically, sometimes you need to move against the current, like that spoke volumes to me. And I feel like so many other women in tech and women creatives are in similar places where they are unfortunately riding that wave, and they're riding it until it just leaves them on bare sand instead of going back into the surf. And so I think it's really important that we kind of challenge each other in that fire to kind of go back to the waves and go back to being open in the water and going back into that feeling of floating. For different women, that feels differently in different ways, but I just feel like we're all challenged in some way to solve a problem in regards to tech and in regards to creatives. We are problem solvers. That's what we do. It's kind of a part of our binary code, if you will. So in order for us to kind of go back to that source, we have to actually be open to that change and that reboot, what that looks like in that ebb and flow. So I love the fact that you mentioned currents, because when we look at code, a lot of times we don't appreciate seeing that current or seeing that flow, but it's there. And so sometimes we don't acknowledge it because it's just kind of, we're not even thinking about it. It's in our hindsight. We're so ingrained into seeing that pattern of that formula. We don't appreciate the originality of that. So I just want to go back to that for women in tech and women creatives. And if you're in a place where you feel like you're just riding that wave, just remember that it's so easy to just simply go back into that current and flow back into that new wave, if you will, to put you back out into open waters. So I really love everything. I mean, I can't even begin to capitalize. I'm still fangirling. Like I'm calming down like right now, but it's like one of those, she just said that. So there's I just love the fact that we can continue to have a conversation about reboot, and it's not necessarily wired to the 9-to-5 grind. It's not wired to a performance output. It really is more on the introspection part of ourselves. So that's the part that I really kind of want to recognize in this area of reboot for women. So if you're out there and you're listening to this, let us know what's resonating with you right now, so that we know exactly kind of where we can go more into this conversation as we talk about it in June throughout our additional bonus episodes on Clubhouse, because that's how we do it. I have additional questions because I'm just like, wow, like really profound statements here. In what way, and we talked about this loosely, things that you have done throughout your life that feels like a reboot, but is there a specific 1 or 2 reboots that really affected you? And then how did that outcome benefit you?
That's a good question. And again, as I have more decades under my belt. So the good news is, I want you to know this, and all your listeners, COVID birthdays don't count. So if you were in lockdown, that birthday doesn't count. So I'm actually still 49. And I've been 49 for quite a few years now. So, okay, anyway, I think it's funny. My kids are getting tired of that. But anyway, that being said,
I'm not the only one. I do that every year. I've been doing that for the past 3 years now.
Lockdown, no birthday.
Yes.
I think to your question, so Danielle, I think there have been 2 major things with hindsight. I played my cards right, because I know what Cicely's saying. I am risk averse, but my creative desires and my low tolerance for BS is what pushes me. Like I'm, I'm very polite, but I also, like, you can only push mommy so far and she barks. So leaving Craft Canada, which at the time Craft was like the Google, right? Or an Amazon equivalent company. So we're leaving this multi-million-dollar brand portfolio that I was working on, this dream job of mine. I'll never forget, like, I literally had the dream job. I read about a job like this in Essence magazine. They profiled a woman I'll never forget named Anne Fudge, best name ever. And she was like a director at Kraft USA. I'm obviously Kraft Canada. And like, I want to be Anne Fudge when I grew up, right? So here I was. And then I'm like, I don't really like this. I don't care about the MSG and Oreos. I want to get out of here. Like, I want to market. So, and technology was this exciting wave. So I left corporate and I went into tech, where I worked on brands like Coca-Cola and Intel and Unilever. And cars. So that was really good. And then I started my first business when I was on maternity leave. And this probably is different than in the US. How long is your mat leave there, if you get a mat leave at all? I think it's just 3 or 4 months.
It's not, what is it, like 6 weeks?
It depends on your employer. If you are lucky, you might get 6 weeks paid. I had to use vacation time and family medical leave, which was 6 weeks paid, short-term disability, and then I took like 3 or 4 weeks unpaid. So I took 12 weeks total, but only 75% of it was paid and not even at 100%. So there's no like national mandate, unfortunately.
Correct.
Yeah, I was pretty sure. So I'm so sorry, Cicely. That sounds brutal. And I know, Danielle, you're also a mom. So we're lucky in Canada. We have 12 months. And I actually now tell people with ZipLaunch, you're starting a business, call it your mat leave business. You have 12 months of a runway to get that business off the ground. You cannot be dibbling and dabbling, having this hobby in the basement for years on end. Because I have worked with those people, male and female, who have done that, right? And then you finally say, how about you introduce this to your client? And then, it's a house of cards that comes falling down. So started my own business on mat leave. Disclaimer, my colicky baby, my firstborn, was harder than the startup. So that was an interesting learning point. So now when it comes time to starting a business, I'm like, it's so easy because I've done it 3 times. But doing that gave me, the experience, the knowledge, the lack of fear, where when I had to reinvent myself because I got laid off, or now with COVID, right? Like I had a very fast growing tech ed business that even to now is like the only coding school that goes into schools across Toronto. And Toronto's, big city, right? So that is really great. That doesn't work when you have COVID and you're locked out of school. So we had to, reboot. And like all the world, this wasn't unique to me. Like I said, Zoom school was real, and so was coding online. But luckily, I could weather the storm. But now we're going back to in person. I have to reboot and decide how do I want to play this, right? So, really looking at making decisions that people at the time said weren't smart decisions, or other moms on mat leave. Again, I know 12 months is a long time. But I knew I was different when I belonged to this like mommy group. I really knew I was different. It was like I've always been different. Like hands down, I've always been an outlier. But this made it official because the mommy group, they weren't people that I knew. It just was like a community group. And the organizer said, what would you do like on your day off without the baby? And when you're a new mom, like you're never without the baby. It's like you have this new mini me, this appendage, and like it's attached to you, right? So having, anyway, long story short, every mom was like, I get a mani-pedi, I go to the spa, I like have a girls shopping trip. And I was like, I'd work in my startup. And I was like, what are they talking about? And to this day, I'm not a mani-pedi. I don't go to the spa. I'm not a girly girl. I washed my hair today just for you two. Like I'm just not that person. But it's so funny because it's also where your interests and your values. What I don't spend on the spa is what I reinvest in myself, both my knowledge, the time that I spent educating myself. I'm a learner for life, and then also my business.
That's spot on. Like, yeah, we're definitely like some sort of solistic something entwined somewhere out there in the universe, because that would have been my response. So
I know, right?
Everyone else wants to get the manis and everything done. I'm like, I just want to sit down long enough to write this book, or just want to finish this design really quickly. Maybe I just want to use this half day to write some email marketing that goes out this week. Like, that's where my brain goes. It's not necessarily a deflect of anything. It's more of this is what I'm comfortable doing. I just want to this makes me happy. I just want to bring myself joy. I totally relate to that. And I love the fact too, that in those 2 moments that were kind of a little bit apart, but kind of unified together in a certain major event, like bringing children into the world, it also is very encouraging to know that even in those 2 kind of separate instances, you were aware of what your assets were. You were aware exactly of kind of where you wanted to go, but you weren't sure necessarily not always how to get to where you wanted to go, but you knew you had to do it. And I feel like that is a huge indicator of some of the things that we can do as women in tech, women creatives. And we talk about, I know I want to get there, but I don't know how to get there. Yep. It's also acknowledging that I do want to do that though. And not necessarily just kind of feeling kind of stuck. And I feel like a lot of women in tech and creative, especially in corporate, sometimes we can feel stuck. I can't acclimate to the next level.
Yeah.
I can't get the upgrade. I can't, move up or down the ladder right now. I'm just here in this kind of almost a fishbowl mechanism, if you will. Like I'm here and I'm in this place and I'm seeing everything else kind of go in and around me. And that mental place can kind of put us in this, well, I can't kind of mode, or I shouldn't kind of mode, because of that comfort of being in that spot. And so I love the fact that you mentioned through your personal experiences of having to reboot, that should also give us a greater insight or encouragement that yes, we can reboot based upon what we already know. I know I'm capable of doing XYZ, therefore I will try to make stronger effort or find ways where I could do XYZ. Understanding what our assets are ahead of time before we can start assessing and delegating out in the world, I think is so much the smarter move in 2022 now. I feel like that's something that I know that either one of us, Cicely, myself, and yourself, Sheri, can really kind of attest to in different ways. But I definitely agree that this, just knowing that you knew what you wanted, you just didn't know, again, how to get to that A, B, C point is really important, because again, sometimes we don't recognize or acknowledge the fact that we have these things. We do want these things. We just have to actually, create that plan.
Like everything you said is exactly bang on. It's actually never been easier for us as women, especially women of color, to own our future. I read, and I remember these quirky little comments. You get rich. Most of the business books are written by men, white men. And, the richer they get, the more arrogant the book gets. And I can tell because, the bestseller when he was a, pre-breakout novel author is not the same book he writes 10 years later, where he name drops like millionaires, billionaires on yachts, right? Like, it's like, is this the same guy whose book I like? Because he's really obnoxious. But the point being is you get rich, two ways. You get the doctor degree. Most of us aren't born to be doctors. I can't even watch Grey's Anatomy. Like, it's too much. I'm sorry, Shonda, it's too much. I
How
can't
thin thee for me?
I know. I'm like, just cut out all the gore, and I'll watch all the soap opera drama. Or you basically you create your own wealth. You create your own business. Now, someone jokingly said to me, if you're a woman, you marry into it. I'm like, yeah, okay. I wasn't raised that way. I guess technically that could be a way. But, I'm a big believer in it has never been easier. Like, again, I'm mid-age. My eldest is now 14. The technology has evolved so much in 14 years. I actually regret that I didn't get into Web 2.0 earlier, as in, what I'm doing now is ZipLaunch. If I had the same skills, I would have gotten into, digital products, marketing my services. I have no regrets. I intentionally chose Codezilla 5 years ago for a reason. But all the tools are there. It really is up to you to take advantage of them. And Danielle, we were talking off mic earlier on, and you said about knowing where you are, where you want to go. I'm going to add one layer to that. I've always had a very strong sense of, I know where I come from, right? I come from both sides of my family. Like, they had to scrap, like anyone who has melanin in them comes from a story, right? Like slavery via the Caribbean, peasant farmers in the Ukraine, where my mom's family is from, hardships growing up. Like, you just know both sides of my family worked really, really hard. And I literally saw how education changed my parents' history, right? So I don't take that for granted, because I was born on the wrong side of the tracks in more ways than one. So I really believe when you know where you come from, you can't complete. Even 2020 was hard. If you think it's hard building a 6-figure business, try losing 6 figures in a year. That's pretty damn hard. That was still easier than the fallout of Black Lives Matter was much, much harder, because as Vice President Kamala Harris said, there's no vaccine for that, right? That one really hit hard, because you're like, what's this all for? But for me, I want creative freedom, but I also want economic freedom, because that is power. That's power for me, and it's power for my children. And I'll be damned if any boss, which is usually a person who doesn't look like me, may not, dress like me, i.e. he's a man, I don't want them controlling my career. they've done that enough times. I've already like not gotten the promotions I think I deserved. I am building my own future. And sure enough, my kids have been working in the company. And in small ways. You're 10, give me Canva post, right? You're 12, I want you to like teach a class, right? And it's not even like I'm not even a what's it called, a tiger mom. But I just think that's how you build life skills.
Oh my gosh, woman after my own heart right here, right here. Oh my goodness. Totally agree. I'm gonna take you up on that challenge. My 10-year-old should be able to create 10 Canva posts without a question. Since that's the norm around here on their level, their web 3.0 level. So I'm just like, okay, you can handle creating Canva posts and turning it into whatever it is you want to turn it into.
Totally.
I totally agree with this. And I think there's such a level where we are at a point now, especially for women in tech, women of color. Let me be very specific. Women of color in tech. There is no time like the present right now to take reign.
Yes.
And I think, and take inventory. Let me say that too. And I think that's really important as we go into this next stage of whatever that is, Web 3.0, Web 4.5, as we go straight into this really dynamic use of technology. We also have to take inventory of the things that is propelling us to keep going forward. And I think that is where I really love the fact that you mentioned, moving forward, knowing where we come from, moving forward, knowing that where women were 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 30 years ago, is a huge, giant leap forward to the space where we are planted right now.
Yeah.
And so because we are in this place and because we are planted in the place that we are planted, it's really important for us to not stop being where we are. It's important for us to keep progressing, to keep growing, to keep moving and pushing forward. And so for women, especially for women of color, it is extremely important for us to not only progress because progress is being made, but also doing it because of our history. Again, as you mentioned before, I love the fact that you mentioned, even if you have a drop of melanin, an extra piece of melanin, whatever that is, you have a story. And that story is more profound than some of the other counterparts in the room that have not even had to even fathom about how their story is going to progress them forward. So it is really important that we have that type of affluence within ourselves, not the influence, but the affluence to move forward and to progress forward. So I am so charged by that. That totally ignites all the bells and whistles, turns on all the lights, like turn them all on, because I just absolutely am very, very attracted to that type of fiery progressiveness that we as women of color need to have in order to progress tech forward. I think in a lot of ways, and just kind of hindsight and throwing out hypotheses and all the things, I think it will be very dependent upon how women of color move forward in tech will determine how fast tech evolves in a lot of areas, especially in areas that are more progressive, urban cities, things along those lines. I think it's almost at our doorstep as to whether or not we choose to walk through that door and accept that challenge to boldly go further than other counterparts that have done before. So I'm just very, very, again, charged by that, completely energized by the fact that women of color are leading. We're not in step, we're not in tune, we are leading. And I think that's the part that I hope more women in tech and more women in the creative industries of color are really taking out of this conversation. I stop talking because I get really heated. So I'm like, whew, okay.
Love. No, preach. Well said, Danielle.
I love you both bringing up those things. Like, it's so important. Like, Danielle knows this about me. But finally, like, this is season 4 of our podcast. So into year 4. And it has taken me this long to finally get into tech, right? So part of it was like my own, just like, oh no, I don't want to do that. There's something, just my own struggles. And then the other part of it was when I was finally trying to break into tech starting last year, I realized that like, it's one of those things that people like to gatekeep, right? Like, it's one of those things that like tech is for certain people. It is not necessarily for people that look like us. It's not necessarily for people who were single moms. It's not necessarily for people who, have a bachelor's degree, but then like kind of went through alternative routes after that. So it was, I learned very quickly that it's very much, it had been up until, you know, TikTok and Instagram and Facebook, and people started networking and getting to talk and getting to say, well, hey girl, no, I work here and we need some, you know, women of color, or we need someone like you to bring your expertise. That only now is it becoming more open. I'm using that kind of loosely here in the United States anyways. Yeah. Like, yes, of course, people have the DEI initiatives. You're trying to get more diverse and attract more better candidates and candidates with different experiences, but it's still not where it should be. So that was like another big thing too. So with, and I think that the industry itself has kind of had its own reboot to say, we can't keep pulling from the same, you know, 1 million white guys that we've been using for, you know, the last 20 years.
1 million. Where's Chad? Where's Brad?
Right. Come on, Brad. Come on, John. Like we can't keep pulling from the same things, because we're gonna always yield the same results. And we need, you know, women. We need the LGBTQ community. We need people of color to really, you know, bring, because that's the representative. That's who we are. Like we're marketing, we're bringing all these things forward, but we need people from every walk of life to make this vision a reality, right? So that's like a crazy thing for me, that when I finally broke into tech, I'm like, oh, like it really is. It's one of those, in the South, we call it the good old boys system. I call it the bro. It's the bro network.
They exist in every single industry. I was looking for a lawyer recently, and I had to say to someone, I said, maybe it's an age thing, because I've made like endless references to my age. But I had like 35-year-old mansplaining, like, I'm hiring you and you're lecturing me. Like one guy was so rude. I think he was shocked when I'm always gracious. And I just politely said, I want to thank you for your time. I wish you the best. So, which is a nice way of saying kiss off.
Yeah.
But
yes.
I've been self-employed for 14 years. I don't talk to people that way. And I can't imagine I would be very, I mean, I also think there's a different standard applied to us. Right, where what a white man can say, we don't have that luxury. But you know, I think Toronto is seen to be, you know, I hate to use references, but we are, you know, the Silicon Valley North. Actually, they've actually said we're actually more than I think LA, Boston, maybe since Silicon Valley combined. Like we have such, we are a very hot city. Those Trump years brought a lot of good people to our side of the border. But it's still very much male dominated. And now that I'm going to make age reference one more time. Last time I'll talk about age, but because now I'm back in the market, right? After COVID, I kind of have to reboot literally. And I'm like, damn, I'm feeling older. There now are more women, but I'm going to now say this about the girls, because ladies, I got to talk to you too. I don't understand why the gals on Instagram and TikTok, like, they're like always in cocktail dresses doing glamour shots, like we're like prom night, and then they then they have like they're posing with their kids. So like that's a personal decision. My kids don't want to be in social media, and I totally respect that. But I don't want to have to see like your perfect Thanksgiving turkey and your perfect house and you in a bikini. Like I just men don't do that. The men don't have to do that. So why do we? I don't understand this.
Yes.
It's two different value systems.
Absolutely. And I mean, like, that's a great point. And thank you for bringing that up. And again, I think people, like, I really didn't kind of see that divide or notice how bad it was until like I, in quote, broke into tech. And the fact that you have to say break into tech in the beginning, like you don't break into nursing, you don't break into, you know, working at the grocery store, but I had to break into tech. Like, it's ridiculous, right? Like, so it was a reboot for me, which has been awesome. But the thing that kind of sparked that thought for me was that when you mentioned like you've done both corporate and tech, and how like now that I'm in tech, like it's cool, it's fine or whatever. But I told Danielle this a couple weeks ago. Like, I am pretty sure that even though it rebooted me and kind of put me on a different path, that it really just brought to light for me that I'm more of a contractor kind of gal. Like, I want to, you know, work for you for like 6 months and then peace out, keep it moving, or extend if I want to. That's just how my brain works. And I understand I value flexibility.
Yes.
Like, I don't want to be like, oh, like I don't work for Google, but I don't want to be like, oh my gosh, like Google's like my dream company and I'm working for them. Like, okay, yeah, that's cute. Like, I'm, you know, if that cool, I like Google. We all use Google. We know Google, but like, Google's not gonna like get my life in a chokehold, right? Like Google is not gonna get me, is not gonna pin me down. Like, I'm sorry. The only commitment I have is to my child and to my marriage. Like that's it.
Okay, no, I agree with you, Cicely. Although, you know, Google knows more about you than like your family, your husband, your children combined, right? Like, even I'm like, what does Google have on me that I need to know?
Right, girl, you better go back and look in those, like in the Google Maps. It'll tell you places that you've been that you didn't even remember you went. So
delete those cookies.
Right, a little scary. But no, I'm just using. I just use them as an example because like Google's the big myself. Oh, I always do. You got to see what's out on the interwebs, y'all. You got to know what's going on.
I know. Do you have a Google alert for your own name, right? Like your name, your brand, like. Yeah, no, I need to know what's happening.
I'm so guilty. I'm so
absolutely
guilty. So bad.
I love that. Guilty. But then that brings me to my next question for you too. That just in what way do you think rebooting is necessary for someone's life? So like what value do you think rebooting adds to life?
Oh, you know, so rebooting is a part of life. So to me, it's not even a value. I mean, I think if you intentionally decide to reboot, like I said, I love to, you know, I don't go on holidays. I just pack up and move, which is pretty extreme. But I actually find that like I want to invest time in a place. I don't like a 2-week investment, right? Like that's more stressful to me. So that to me is adding value to your life through new experiences, new opportunities, new people. But you know, sometimes you don't have a choice, Cicely. Like you may get dealing with death. Thank God I have not dealt with that on a personal level, because that is the one reboot that I no one would ever wish on anyone, you know, death, war. I have lost my job twice. You know, I've survived a couple of economic meltdowns. And in some ways, many people will tell you afterwards it was a blessing in disguise, right? So it gave you the impetus. You know, the mat leave startup was also like, I didn't want to go back to 70 hours a week at a digital ad agency, right? It was a very strategic motivation to get up and running. So, you know, I think it partly depends on the nature of the reboot, but life is, back to you, Danielle, ebb and flow. So I think the biggest fear we actually have nowadays is not what life does to you, but whether you are grabbing onto life. Like, you know, today's a good example. I finally did my taxes. It's 6 weeks late, not, you know, penalty late, but I meant to do it six weeks ago, right? I'm a planner. And you know what? All I want really to do was watch Netflix because I'm really involved in this great soap opera, this Korean soap opera, right? I like, you know, quirky international shows. We live in a world where between like social media, Netflix, you know, inertia probably is the biggest barrier. And you have to stop and say, no, I'm not going to leave my energy for rants on Twitter or watching TikTok. I need to rechannel that towards building my empire. And that was a language I would actually use. Partly, I'm going to, you know, gender racial biases. The white guys don't have to deal with the stuff that we have to deal with. The white guys without kids, even if they do have kids, you know, the Gary V's, I'm not dogging him, but they don't have to deal with what we have to deal with, right? I had 2 kids. I don't think husbands really realize what we deal with until COVID, if you were able to work from home and you're blessed enough, because sitting on your arse and tapping on a computer is pretty good compared to what our ancestors had to do. I'm very aware of that. And like, you know, you get your kid to school, you come back, you're the dish fairy, and you start all over again, right? Like you have 4 or 5 hours of a day to actually work on your biz. So the point being is, you know, you have to grab life by the horns, because otherwise I think it's harder than ever. We have ample food, ample toys to keep us occupied and happy.
Yeah, we're both in here like, ooh, yeah.
I know. I'm like, I couldn't unmute. She's typing. I see like the fingers flying across. We're sharing a mutual document, so she can see when I type and I can see when she's typing.
Oh, cool. See, the techie me wants to see that. I'm like, oh, the techie me's like, oh, what are you doing?
Yeah, like we're both having this kind of interactive, if you will, like
you're chatting while I'm talking. I want to know.
Thriving. I know, right? It's one of those things where if there's something that really strikes both of us, and then we have a whole list at this point of things that are really, you know, strikes us both in a heart way, but also in a professional way. These are things that becomes quotables, you know, for us to spread across all June. And so I think it's really important that while we're in that moment, that we take note, of all the things. So we take inventory of the things that are supplying us, fueling us in that way, so that we can actually share that out with the rest of the world, so that they too can be inspired and encouraged throughout the month of June. So I think it's really important when we talk about rebooting, you're just really diving deep into, this is how I've rebooted and this is what ways have worked for me, but these are ways that also can work for anyone on a practical level. And then on top of that, here are other ways that have inspired me in order to encourage rebooting in whatever season that you're in. And I've mentioned this before on previous podcasts and previous episodes of, just honoring the season that we're in. Yeah. And there's a deep kind of butting of head in that, but there's also a deep level of embracing and acknowledging. And that's a big part in rebooting, right? Is understanding that previous code that was working before is no longer relevant and no longer serves us. Excuse me. It was potty time. So I didn't pick the potty training timer off. Sorry, that was a moment today.
Oh wow, potty training timer. That exists? Is that a new thing?
Nope. I just set it on my phone. So I have a 3, 6, 9, 12 schedule. I don't really focus so much on the 9 because it's just late. But if he's up that late, then I'll put him on there. But
I was like, wow, I'm feeling like a delinquent mom. I'm like, so quick story. We thought our youngest wasn't potty trained, and we found out that no, she was fine at daycare. It was when she came home, she's like, yeah, I'm going to be lazy again. And sure enough, she's my lazy kid. She's like, what? It was a Monday to Friday thing versus a weekend thing.
There it was. See, that's also been the slip up with me. So I've definitely put the kids down for sure. Like, okay, Monday through Friday, we're doing it. But if mom's really tired on that Sunday, it might just be until like 2 or 3 before I get back to you on that. We'll just hold on to good old huggies. But it's one of those things where I completely attest to this idea of, letting go of that old structure, letting go of that old code. It doesn't serve us anymore. Yeah. So if it doesn't serve us, then we need to rewrite it. Yeah. And so this is the part where, rebooting really takes form and takes shape, is where do we go from there? And how do we know that it works? We don't, because we keep testing. We're in beta. We're in constant beta for a while until we start figuring out what source code serves us better than others.
That's good. I'm going to trademark that. I'm going to steal that from you. Doing constant beta. That might appear in my social feed. Okay. I'll give you credit though.
Okay,
that's good.
I'm for it. I love it. I can talk code analogy all day. No, it's my love language.
Good ones. You really should copyright them.
Definitely holding on to some of these for sure. But yes, I definitely just I really relate to a lot of things that you're saying in regards to wanting to, reboot and what that looks like for any other person out there in the creative and tech industries. But I also want to really commend you, because I know that's really hard to talk about the things that failed. And for us as women, failure, we completely program and process failure much differently than our male counterparts. I will say for women, we process failure as a more of an emotional attachment, something that we have to really drop and release in order to pick back up again for ourselves. And whereas for men, it's not a thing. Okay, we did it, we done it, we can move on. Sometimes that can be to our advantage, and sometimes that can be to our disadvantage, the way that we process failure. But I think it's really important that you acknowledge areas where it was not working or serving you in some way. You decided to change that script, change that code, interchange to fill in the holes and the gaps with something else that will work. And that created, ZipLaunch, that created Codezilla. This is like, and do you say Codezilla like, like with emphasis, like Codezilla? Like, do you
you know what? I will now. Now that I heard, I might actually have you might have you give me an MP3 of that. That was good.
I just feel like every time you say it, I'm like, I need to say it with that emphasis. Like, see that anime feel. I'm a huge anime fan. So
yeah, you and my daughters. I thought I was a creative, but I realized I was too one-dimensional. I didn't do the audio.
I love that name, and I love the meaning behind that in regards to spreading and branching out as much as you have. So again, taking the things that you have learned and pivoting, going from corporate to starting up your own tech startup, making it. Now, I'm not saying it grew to that. You helped make that a 6-figure business. So taking that ownership and that pride and that resonance and understanding that's part of your story. that you can now leave with other people, or you can use that in a way to encourage other people. Those are the things that really kind of resonate with me when we talk about rebooting, because when we reboot, it just really kind of rechanges the game. It changes the way that we play. It changes the way that we want to reach to the next level. And so I'm hoping that more people are understanding in listening range of hearing your stories and hearing your failures and your triumphs, that they better understand that I can change the game for myself too.
Wow, that girl crush just got heavier. You're both really gracious, but like I really enjoy your podcast. So this is like my Oprah moment, right? I'm like, wow, pinch myself. Because you're both really insightful, but you also drop like you have really different ways to look at something, and very different angles, which adds value to me as both a listener and now as a very fortunate participant. But I think oftentimes, I have like literally 4 business books by my bedside, but they are really are more black and white, there's no gray. And I do think, especially since 2020, I had to podcast. Podcasting was mental health for me, more so than like, how do I build a successful business? How do I build a brand? And I think you need a combination, because I think sometimes, I'm going to genderize this again, I think as women, and you kind of hit on this, Danielle, we focus too much on intrinsically the emotional side. Guys could use more of that. We'd have a safer world if men were more emotional and thought about that. But on the flip side, I really believe taking action. And this really came up with your bonus episode that I really enjoyed when you were talking to Shonda about manifesting. Because I feel like rebooting is just manifesting, but like, rebooting is soft, genteel. Sorry, manifesting is soft and genteel. Rebooting is like hard. Like you got to make this happen. You can't just wish, hope, dream it. You have to, like, it might be due tomorrow, right? Something urgent happened. You need to reciprocate appropriately. And I feel like taking action is the first step, because it can take a lot longer to fix your head, to change the emotions, to feel happier. For me, it's chocolate. I'm an emotional eater, so I find ways to short circuit the healing process, the code. But seriously, I mean, one of the books I really love that talks about they studied what makes people successful. It's what everyone wants to know, that, right? How do I become successful? And as moms, how do I raise a successful child? And I don't know if the book called Grit by Angela Lee Duckworth has come up. But I mean, her book really, they studied, like, it's not age, race, gender, income, school, all those isms. It really boiled down to, do you quit before you finish? If you don't, you have grit and persistence, or the other word is like the marshmallow test, right? You get 2 marshmallows if you forfeit having one now, right? So both my kids, I'm like, have a marshmallow test. Like, I've really done that. So my eldest kid told the youngest daughter, like, she kind of like, it wasn't a complete test because she kind of ruined the beta. But anyway, the point being is, like, you need to just take action, because it's like when you mentally feel upset and you go for a walk, you already feel better. The same stuff is there, but physically changing the environment, moving your body, doing something, like taking a baby step towards the mile-long marathon you have to run, that is faster and easier than trying to fix the emotions. So that's where I feel like sometimes we do have to take a playbook from the men, without forgetting that we're women. I think we're wired differently for the most part. I don't want to not be who I am, but I need to drop the emotional stuff instead of focus on action.
I love that. Wow. That is so, so incredibly profound. I absolutely love that. And it is like more of the kinesthetics of how elements are bonded in this for women, that creates that emotional response that we have versus our male counterparts. And I think that is also something that we should not necessarily detain or distrain or downgrade in any way, shape, or form. We can really use that as a superpower in a lot of ways. Yeah. But I still think that is something that we have to actually accept and understand that's part of our makeup, right?
Yeah.
We talk we'll go a little bit deeper into that, that HTML markup. That markup will always be there. It will never go away.
Oh, you're good. what number are we on now? I've lost count.
That markup will never go away. We are who we are. Those are the things, those are the principles that make us unique. However, we do have the ability to alter that kinesthetic. We do have that ability to shape it in a way that actually continues to benefit us and our lineage. So I think it's really important that, we always think about that, having that as a core focus. Thank you for bringing that up, because I think that more of us need to hear that. We don't hear that enough in our circles and our friends and our family sometimes. And I think that's really important that we continue to speak those words to each other, because that does help us define better who we want to be and where we want to go.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, I think I have one more question, then I'm done after that, and then Cicely can totally take over with our flash questionnaire. So we always kind of round up things. We always ask this question to all of our guests, which is, what did you want to be when you were a kid? What did you want to be growing up? And then how is that, if it is, related to what you do now?
I really wanted to be a teacher. But in all fairness, when you're a kid, the only person you're really exposed to beyond your mom and your dad is the teacher, right? So whether that was something innate or something profound, because my grandfather was a, prairie school teacher, and that kind of distilled down to my aunts and to me. Again, the older I get, the more I really think it's nature versus nurture.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll never forget this, I really struggled throughout school. Whatever the class average was, usually B, I was below it. So there's no brainiac here. When I say taking action, I just, I'm a marathoner. I will not win any races. I just don't quit, right? That is I'm a worker bee. Girlfriend's a worker bee. So the point being is, I struggled throughout school. My teachers told my mom, don't expect great things from her. I was really I thought you liked me. I was quite devastated. But in a way that kind of pushes me to, I'll show you, right? Like people always say, use positive energy. Negative fueling for me is actually quite positive as well. I turn it into positive action. And I'll never forget, I was 18 and I thought, I want to work for myself because I'm hardworking and I'm good with people. The word entrepreneur was not in my vocabulary, nor do I think it was even in the common vernacular, because this was last millennium. So ironically, my dad's side of the family, my Caribbean stock, we come from entrepreneurs. So I really have become a living hybrid of teaching via business and a business that teaches.
Wow, Cicely, this is so cool. I'm just this is totally ideal to just affirming again, there's more of us out there. We're not the only ones in this total alien sense, but it's one of those also moments where it's so encouraging, inspiring to know that regardless of where you are in that plane, whether you are starting or in the middle or wrapping up, or you feel like you're toward the end there is still a common theme of the next, whatever the next is, the next thing, the next ...
Yeah.
And I think that's so cool that even as a kid, you kind of had that connection of, infinite possibilities, right? We talk about that all the time. We talk about, data and it being this infinite thing. And here you are already embedded with a certain set of data and already taking that, analyzing it as a kid and saying, you know what, ... I can do the next thing. I could do something different than what was already kind of brought to me. And I totally relate to that as a third generation entrepreneur. I completely relate to that story of the ... It's not written yet, therefore I can write it. It's not written yet, therefore my kids can write it. It's not written yet, but the next woman who's similar to my story or similar to my past can write that next chapter. It's total Hobbit, Lord of the Rings moment. Bilbo just...
You had me at Lord of the Rings. It's over. You're my second wife. Thank you. I'm my first wife. My second spouse, my first wife. We don't need a wife. Everyone needs a wife. I don't need a husband. I need a wife.
Yes. That's Cicely. Cicely's the second right there. It's one of those things where it's that that your part in this is only a one piece of the full puzzle. I know that this paragraph of text is going to only be one section of the larger website or the larger program or the larger story of this. So it's just kind of understanding, not to say that, you're defined to that spot. It's just saying that there's so much more. There's so much more to the tale. There's so much more to the story, and allowing yourself to just encrypt yourself into that one part is doing that, whatever that is, very well. So for women in tech and women creatives, I hope that's really, really encouraging you to just etch your piece of code and be proud of that damn piece of code and be so honorable about that code and flash that to everybody in the world about that piece of code, and then allow someone else to continue on the things that you have built. I think that's the most honorable thing that we could do. So I love this conversation. I was like, deep down, I'm like, don't cry. Don't cry. This is so cool. I'm so glad we got to talk today. This has been so magical.
But I want to make sure, am I allowed, ladies? I want to get your permission. Can I get like a screenshot? Because I this is like going up on my screensaver. and I would share on social media I obviously tag people. Is that okay?
Totally.
That's perfectly fine.
Okay.
Yeah, we encourage it.
I'm screenshotting you. Well, you never know. I never want to be offensive to anyone, but yeah, I'll take.
We appreciate you asking.
Yeah, it's okay. Thank you. I'm going to stop there.
She's like, okay, one was enough. One screenshot was enough.
No. I was like, you didn't see me. I was like, you were supermodel. I was
you did the bundle.
Oh,
okay.
yeah. Oh, yeah.
That's hilarious.
I love it. Yes, I'm so for this. Well, I again love this conversation. I'm really hoping that tons of women out there who are listening to this podcast are really getting all the juicy juicies today, because this definitely hit all the heartstrings for me. I'm super passionate about this type of work, this type of lineage that we can build for ourselves as women in tech and women in creative industries. And I definitely want to continue that story into the next chapter, into the next episode, into the next season, whatever that lies for the More Than Graphics podcast. So again, Sheri, I just want to thank you. Thank you. And for people who want to know, again, more about you, how to contact you about ZipLaunch, because I know there are some women out there that would need to know more information about this. So how can they find and connect with you?
Thank you. Go to ziplaunchme.com. And I'm also on social media, right? LinkedIn, Instagram. So Sheri with one R, Allain.
Yay. And we'll be sharing that info as well across all of our podcast feed too. But I think we're moving on now to our flash questionnaire. So I hope you're ready. Give us the first thing that comes to mind as we share these questions with you.
I'm probably dreading this the most. I'm going to be really, really candid. But if
everyone does.
Yeah.
Okay.
Really? Okay.
And that's what we love about it the most too, is that people who are very reserved, normally just the first thing that flies out of your mouth, which is what we want, is what happens. And I promise it's always good. It's always good.
I have no filter. I don't even play poker, thank God, because I have just no poker face, no filter.
It's the ancestors. The ancestors gave us the brows and the eyes and the furrow. We can't help it.
Yeah.
If you think back to aunts and grandmothers, it's the ancestors.
I don't play. It's true.
All right. So I'll go with the first one here. Maybe if my dog stops barking, maybe.
Ooh, now I want to see your dog, Cicely. What kind of dog do you have?
Ma'am, we're leaving her downstairs. I'll show you a picture later.
Okay. I'm not sandbagging. I'm not trying to kill time. Trust me.
Yeah. Okay. So something new that you've learned in the past year.
As in 2022? I have been learning phenomenal things about how to value your business. They'll put a dollar figure on it. And stuff that they don't teach you in business school and stuff that they don't teach you in business books, which is how do you grow? You don't make money with your business. You make money when you sell your business. And no one ever gets into a business thinking like that. But I feel like this is where I'm going to really gender alpha male this. That kind of Wall Street stuff, no, I'm not there. But I feel like like those guys who do those, this is like Shark's Tank to the next level. And I feel like they're talking a different language. And I don't really want to talk that language, but I want to know enough to understand how do I build, how do I build $1 million business? Which I was never part of my dream even. Codezilla was for my daughters because they weren't getting tech education in school, and girls are being left out, and people of color are being left out. So all three, right? All three for my daughters. So now I'm like, you know what? This is important. This is valuable, a valuable service. I want the valuation. How do I build a business that is valued accordingly?
Ma'am, what a strong way to start off. I love that. Like, we're just all the snaps and the claps and all the things. That's awesome. So your favorite vacation or getaway spot?
Didn't I just say I pack up and move? Okay, so I have to give shout outs to St. Lucia. My lineage comes from St. Lucia, and that's where I'll actually be in June, Danielle, when you've got your stuff happening. This is the first time because Codezilla would do summer camps when school was closed. I'm going to be spending a large part of June with my family. Haven't seen them pre-COVID, so it's called Helen of the. They call Helen of the Islands because it's like Helen of Troy. It's a beautiful island. So my plug to my second home.
That's beautiful. I love that. Sweet snacks or savory snacks?
Oh, when I'm PMSing, both. When I'm PMSing, I'm sorry, it's insane. I actually was going to create, no lie, I'm an entrepreneur. I was going to actually create what I called it the PMS pack, where we were going to have like a large plastic bag full of sweet and savory snacks and sell it. Like, we're going to be a great seller for, like, I bet now if I was to do that with TikTok and millennial women, or Gen Y, I guess, I think that would be, like, honestly a seller. I think the PMS pack would be, it's kind of like having the what's it called, what's that monthly box called, like the gift boxes. I think it's the same idea. I just was ahead of my time for women who have hormones, hormone overload.
I love that. I can fully see that happening, and I would partake and I would buy. Harry Potter or Star Wars?
Neither. I you know what? Can I say ET? I like sci-fi that's down to earth. And I had a girl crush on Drew Barrymore because I liked her hair. No other girl had ponytails like me growing up, like the frizzy haired, curly haired girl in I'm from the prairies, which is like, have you ever seen the movie Fargo? And you might be too young to know the movie Fargo, but I lived there, but just north of there. So it was like kind of like wacky people.
Oh, that's awesome.
Who really talk like that, but like it was just a hot mess of a braces, glasses, and frizzy hair. So Drew Barrymore was like, when I looked kept, Drew Barrymore was like, she was like my Rachel haircut, right? I never watched Friends my entire life. I'm very proud of that, but I know about the Rachel haircut. Drew Barrymore was my hair crush. So, he was ET, right? What was not to love?
I know ET's so cute. I love that. That's like an outlier. It's the first time we've ever had an outlier like that. So I like that. Do you prefer digital books or physical books?
Physical, analog all the way.
Always for me.
Yeah.
If you could go back in time. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I say like my I have like new glasses and I still can't like. And you know what? It hurts my eyes. I need to.
Oh, it's glasses. I should be wearing glasses, but here we are.
No judgment. No judgment.
It's the ring light. I always like I tell Danielle it's the ring light. I can't be having the reflection because then I go blind. So see.
I have the reflection. I let it go. I let it go.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate the grace. Thank you. If you could go back in time, where would you go and whom would you see?
That's a great question. And I really do like history. So that feels like a really, like anything's possible. But I also, when people talk about the good old days, I'm always like, for whom? Because they weren't good for me. Right. So I'm like, no. I actually very honest. I tell, especially younger women, and I'm in Canada, I'm not in the US. I am so grateful. I am Canadian born and a woman of Black heritage living in this time and era, right? Like I don't mince. So I honestly am grateful for now. But I think if I was to go back, it would be probably fairly contemporary and to meet someone who I admired. And I would probably meet like Anita Roddick, who's the founder of the Body Shop before it got sold out. But and I've got 2 of her books by my bedside. She was groundbreaking. She was like contemporary of Ben and Jerry's and what's his name? That virgin, Richard Branson. But because she died prematurely of cancer, she doesn't get the, pre-social media, she doesn't get the accolades she deserves. But she was doing fair trade and environmentally friendly and women's rights. And she was a working mom. And for a period, she was a single mom because her husband was like traveling the world. Like she was ahead of her time, but no one knows about her. And the Body Shop was bought out, so it's not the same kind of company. But it really, like, even my mom was saying how cool it was at the time. And I feel like we need more of that and more women like she was fierce. She was a fighter. And I feel like she'd be a woman who just being like in her aura for a few hours, I would leave being like, yes, I could do this.
I think that's such a great answer. And like you said, it's very interesting to see like people who straddle generations, how we can see like so many things that happened before social media that don't get the recognition, or people who don't have the clout now simply because the masses can't, it can't be seen by the masses. So I think that's such a great point.
Yeah.
What are your love languages or love language?
I don't know what that means. I don't think I'm hip enough to know what that means. Is it like talk dirty to me? Like talk dirty to me?
Ma'am. Well, I mean, it could be. Well, here in, I'm pretty sure he's an American-born psychologist, but there was this whole theory of coming up with love languages as a way of communication. So, and there's 5 of them, and I can never remember all 5. I always leave out one.
I really, really don't know if my marriage will survive COVID.
Absolutely. She's like, let's get through that first, then we can focus.
This might help.
See, it might help. It might.
You know what? There's a reason. There's a reason I'm watching Korean soap operas because I've discovered. So you have to watch. I got tired of like flashing boobies on like Game of Thrones. Like, girlfriend, you're gonna catch a cold. Put that away. Like, I don't mind the bare chests of the men, but the moral of the story is the cultures where they can't be too overt. So I've been traveling through because of COVID. I've been traveling to Turkey, South India, Pakistan, Korea. Now is my thing. Before other people were into Korea, Squid Games. I was already into Korea, but these cultures, they're a little bit more reserved, so they know how to make lusty eyes. There's no language happening, Cicely. It's all with the eyes. And there's a fine art. I figured out the framework. Usually by episode 8, you might get a kiss on the cheek, and she acts shocked. Ooh. It's like, ooh, you got to like 0.5 base. But it just kind of funny. Yeah, you have to go to the old-fashioned cultures to get the lusty eyeballs. No language.
I love it. She's like, I don't need a language. I've got lusty eyeballs. I love that. That is literally the best answer we've ever had. Oh, it's so good. And last but not least, I know you're going to have an amazing answer for this one. What is the best part of being a grown-up?
I own my time. I own my life. I don't have to answer to family. I am responsible to family, and I honor my family, and I'm mature enough to know they did the best they could if they're parents, and to know that I'm doing the best that I can as a parent to my daughters. But the miracle of having life, and I said already, this time, this era, this part of the world, that's just like lucky DNA. I really do love life. Maybe not the news. The news is pretty depressing, but I feel so blessed. So I know, like, head is engaged, my heart's engaged, my hands are engaged. Life is good. And I have my health, as do my family, my kids. That's number 1. So life is good.
I love that. That was the sweetest answer I've
ever
had.
Oh my goodness.
The sweetest one. It goes right up there. We love that. But that was so sweet. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's like top three. I think very, very much top three, because I feel like a lot of us don't think about the introspection part until we get, till we have to get to the introspection part. And I just really appreciate it when we hear that early on. That's so humbling and so cool to hear. So thank you.
Thank you. I have had the best Easter long weekend. Like pre-COVID, since COVID. Thank you both, Danielle and Cicely. You're really special ladies, and this is what I love. I like the episode about tribes and finding your tribe.
Mm-hmm.
I would never have met you in the real world. We don't live in the same, and this is the miracle of the internet, right? Like, I wish I had this stuff when I was younger and it was kind of hard growing up. I'm like, my people are out there, right? Tech, check. Creative, check. Black women, check. Women of color, like, I just really love how you check so many boxes that one box alone would be really memorable to me. But the fact that you're the whole package, I really want to seriously thank you for doing what you do.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That is the honest, best compliment. While I'm getting a text message at the exact same time. I really appreciate that so much. And I really do, like, sentimentally fangirling. Like, when I initially saw that you had signed up, I was like, I know this name. And it's kind of weird that I know this name and this person's actually going to be speaking to us in the joint space. And then as you continue to share bio and all the things, and I'm like, no, really? Like, this is such a cool, really, really honest and totally introspective moment for me, just to be on the receiving end of this conversation. So thank you for dropping gems with us. Thank you for being real and sharing your stories. These testimonies will definitely live on well past us. So thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So,
and I just have to say, before we conclude, that those who can't see, Sheri's curls are popping. Like, she talked about how she like got a little dressed up for us. I've been trying to tell you that the whole thing, and I've been getting derailed because I've been thinking about other stuff. But her hair, she has the most beautiful curl pattern, just these lovely, lustrous, bouncy curls. So for those who won't be watching this, like via Facebook, who won't see the live stream, just if you check her out for no other reason, the hair is A1.
Yes. Snap.
You know what? That's really kind, because I was on a podcast with someone else 2 days ago, and I said there are 3 things in life guaranteed. For everyone else, it's 2 things: death and taxes. For Sheri, it's frizz. So you are very kind, Cicely, because this was a hair wash day. It'll be a little bit different tomorrow, but I thank you for being so sweet to me today.
It'll be bigger and even more. It'll be bold and beautiful and big tomorrow.
No, you know what? This is a Zoom effect. This is a Zoom effect, because I can assure you, I'm not being modest. Like, I am not the same woman. Honestly.
You heard it here first, guys.
That's right. That's right.
I love it. But thank you again so much. I have had the best time. I know Danielle has as well. And it's so awesome when we find people that we connect with on this level. And like you said, like, it's part of the reason that we do the podcast and that we continue to do it is because we wish we had something like this when we were younger, something like this at kind of the start of our career. So thank you so much for being a part of it.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right. So thanks, everyone, for listening to the More Than Graphics podcast. Continue to subscribe and follow us wherever you listen to podcasts. And send us your feedback on Facebook or Twitter on how our life stories and our virtual safe spaces are helping you navigate, empower, or encourage you. And be sure to check out the mtgthepodcast.com website and subscribe to our emails for exclusive behind-the-scenes moments like Clubhouse, which you can join us every Tuesday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Until next time, everybody.
Bye.
Happy Easter.